I come to this? I've dreamed myself 1,000 times around the world, but I can't get out of this place.
Alright, so we'll take a look today at Autopsy, and I'll allow you or invite you to pause your video here. And feel free to pause or rewind throughout the vocabulary to begin the session as well. So, to begin, we'll take a look at a case about a man named Madison Rutherford. At least that was the name that his friends thought he was born with. However, he did change his name along the way. And his friends were really devastated to learn about a tragic death that happened in a car accident in Mexico. However, they later learned about some of the facts with the case. So I'm going to read from an article that I found about this. It begins like this. Travel to Mexico, dig up a grave, load the corpse into a rented Chevrolet Suburban, and stage a fiery July 11, 1998 crash near Monterrey, Mexico. Then sit back and wait until several life insurance companies pay $7 million in life insurance benefits. The problem was that Madison T. Rutherford, 39, of Bethel, Connecticut, overestimated the willingness of insurance companies to pay and underestimated the abilities of forensic scientists. Rutherford, who began using that name in the late 1980s instead of John Patrick Sankey, his given name, appeared very much alive as he listened to U.S. District Judge send him to prison for the next 5 years, the maximum sentence for wire fraud. The next month, Riney Jefferson, Rutherford's estranged wife, who is 20 years his senior, also faces sentencing on the wire fraud charge. She has filed for divorce. Recovered from Mexican police was the charred remains of the vehicle, within the charred remains of the vehicle was a medical alert necklace containing the word penicillin and the name M. Rutherford, and a wristwatch inscribed "To Madison, Love, Riney." The faked death was staged when Rutherford traveled to Mexico with a retired Connecticut State police trooper to deliver a rare dog to a breeder. The trooper was not charged after passing a lie detector test. So Rutherford went on to use this dug-up corpse to then stage his own death in the Suburban. The Suburban is in flames, and unfortunately, one of the keys to illustrating this staged death was the fact that the man whose grave he dug up was much older than him, and the teeth showed that kind of wearing, and also showed, according to, in comparison to Rutherford's dental records, showed that it was not a match. So he was found out. Using techniques like this is something that an autopsy would be able to shed light on. And so the people who would be doing an autopsy would be a medical examiner or a coroner. We'll talk about the differences and similarities in just a moment. The autopsy would be necessary whenever cause of death is unclear. So these would include violent crime, suicide, accident, and a natural death when the doctor is not present or the patient was not under the care of a medical facility. Any death that occurs in a correctional facility, in other words, in a jail, and any results from communicable diseases that may pose a threat to public health. Alright, so these are the manners of death and the descriptions of each: natural, accidental, suicidal, homicidal, and undetermined. There are two very different systems. Forsyth County operates under the coroner system, and this official is elected, does not have to have any kind of medical background, although obviously that would be handy, and does not actually have to have a forensic background as well. The medical examiner system, which dates back just to 1870, has to be a physician and trained in pathology. And there are some medical examiners even surrounding Forsyth County in our area. So the death investigation begins at the death scene, and then for a medical examiner, the body would be transported to the morgue. The coroner would limit their investigation of the body to that death scene. The medical examiner would then conduct labs with different types of evidences there. So at the death scene, may draw sketches of the body, take photographs of the scene, the face, the underside of the body, signs of trauma, and then using different strategies to estimate time of death and the post-mortem interval, so the amount of time that elapsed from the time of death to when the body is being examined. Within this, livor mortis and rigor mortis would be evaluated. So livor mortis would be another word for lividity, which is the settling of the blood, the pooling of the blood in the lowest portion of the body, which can help to tell you if the body's been moved or how long the body's been there. Rigor mortis is the stiffening of the muscles, which occurs at different time intervals after death. And then collecting evidence, chain of custody, and so forth. So when the medical examination continues at the morgue, then several things are sought out. The cause of death and the mechanism of death are the biggest objectives. In doing so, the autopsy actually begins before any kind of incision is made externally. And so x-rays can be done, also biological evidence, any kind of living or once living sources on the body. This could include something like pollen even on the outside of the body, something that was once living. It could also include DNA from underneath the fingernails if there was perhaps a struggle. And then non-biological evidence, maybe fibers on the outside of the body and in clothing or so forth. Okay, the autopsy continues with a Y incision across the collarbone here and then down into the chest. And in addition to anything that would be found internally, algor mortis is also examined, which is where the medical examiner would actually take the temperature of the body from the liver at the time of the body's discovery and then work backwards to figure out the likely amount of time that has elapsed before or from the death to the time of investigation, the postmortem interval. So at an ambient temperature of about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature of the body, which obviously as an internal temperature during life is at about 98.6 Fahrenheit, drops about 1.5 degrees every hour until the body reaches ambient temperature. So a way of being able to estimate this would be to use a formula like this, whether you're dealing with Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit. You start with the internal body temperature during life, you subtract whatever the current body temperature is, either determined rectally from the scene of the crime or by the liver in the autopsy, and then dividing by this denominator. So once again, this is showing external examination of things that can be present before an incision is even made. Okay, now this is looking at the collecting of evidence of blood for DNA as well as semen, and I'd like you to please pause the video now. This is looking at hair and tissue. I'd like you to read this. Go ahead and pause your video now. And then finally we'll look at fingernails and bite marks, collecting evidence. Go ahead and pause your video now. This is an evidence bag, and you see the chain of custody that would be kept on there. And then assuming that a medical examiner has the case and it goes back to the lab, then there would be a toxicology report, which could detect drugs, alcohol, poisons, histology, study the tissues, neuropathology, disease and trauma associated with the nervous system, and then serology, including any of the blood, semen, other bodily fluids. So during the toxicology report, alcohol can be detected from the blood through gas chromatography, and then also some other types of tests on certain types of drugs. We'll go into this more in detail at a later time. Histology, again, the study of tissue samples, and so you can look for anything that may have been going on, for example, detecting cancers and so forth. This would be healthy lung tissue, here on the left, lung tissue of a patient with emphysema. So you can tell certain things about what was going on in that person's body here. By the way, this is a blood culture of blood that has malaria, which is caused by a protist infection, and so those green clusters are the malaria parasites. Neuropathology specific to the nervous system, and it's interesting, more than half of all deaths encountered by MEs are associated with the nervous system. So common examinations: brain trauma, brain cancer, Alzheimer's. Now serology, which is basically any fluid, biological fluid of the body, can show certain types of clues. It can give ideas of infection, give blood types, and DNA profiles, which is a type of individual evidence. And then in the autopsy report, the structure has a heading: external examination, evidence of injury, internal examination, findings, and opinion. So the report would progress relatively in the order in which the ME is conducting the evaluation. So this would be an example of a report. And then here you see again some of that information here. All right, thanks for joining in, and I will invite you to read the summaries and pause and rewind as you care to.